She was a lonely widow with dementia, struggling to cope. He was the sanitation worker who came every Tuesday. Nobody could have predicted the bond they would form, or the tears it would bring. The little house on Elm Street stood quiet, bathed in the soft morning light. It was a house that held a lifetime of memories, most of them now fading, like old photographs, in the mind of its 88-year-old inhabitant, Opal Zuka. Dementia was slowly stealing her away, piece by piece. Her daughter, Sarah, lived an hour away, juggling a demanding career as a lawyer and the constant, gnawing worry about her mother living alone. Sarah had installed a security camera on the front porch, a digital eye to watch over Opal. It wasn't about spying. It was about love, about making sure her mother was safe. She checked the feed religiously, a ritual of reassurance and anxiety intertwined. The camera captured mundane moments. Opal watering her wilting petunias. Opal struggling with the mail. Opal simply sitting on the porch swing, gazing at a world that was becoming increasingly blurry. One Tuesday, the camera captured something different. It was trash day, and Opal, her frail frame unsteady, was wrestling with the heavy bin. She stumbled, her grip loosening, and the bin toppled, sending a cascade of refuse across the driveway. Opal herself went down, a small, crumpled figure on the cold concrete. Sarah, watching the live feed on her phone during a lunch break, gasped. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She watched, frozen, as the seconds stretched into an eternity. Then a figure appeared in the frame. A man, wearing the bright orange uniform of a sanitation worker, rushed to Opal's side. He was blurry, his face obscured by the angle of the camera, but Sarah could see the urgency in his movements, the gentle way he helped Opal to her feet. She held her breath, watching as he righted the bin and began picking up the scattered trash. He was saying something to Opal, but the audio was too faint to make out the words. Sarah felt a wave of relief, quickly followed by a surge of curiosity. Who was this man, and why was he being so kind to her mother? She saved the footage, a knot of questions forming in her mind. She had to know more. She needed to know more. That evening, after a long and stressful day, Sarah decided she'd review more videos to unveil what's really going on. The next day, and the days after, Sarah meticulously reviewed the security camera footage. She fast-forwarded through the quiet hours, pausing whenever the sanitation truck rumbled into view. And there he was again and again, the same man always on Tuesdays. His name, she learned from a barely audible exchange, was Billy. It wasn't just about the trash. Billy didn't just empty the bin and leave. He lingered. He talked to Opal. He helped her with small tasks, carrying groceries, sweeping the porch, even deadheading her roses. He treated her with a respect and tenderness that brought tears to Sarah's eyes. In one video, Billy was patiently explaining to Opal, for what seemed like the 10th time, that he wasn't her late husband, George. Opal, her eyes clouded with confusion, kept calling him George, her voice trembling with a mixture of hope and despair. Billy, instead of correcting her harshly, simply smiled and said, "It's all right, Opal. I'm here to help." Sarah zoomed in on Billy's face, studying his features. He was a man in his late 40s, perhaps, with kind eyes and a weathered face that spoke of a life lived outdoors. There was a gentleness about him, a quiet strength. Let's shift to Billy's perspective for a moment. Billy saw Mrs. Zuka, as he called her, as a fragile echo of his own grandmother, who had passed away a few years earlier. He remembered her struggles with dementia, the way her memories had flickered and faded like a dying flame. He saw that same flicker in Mrs. Zuka's eyes, and it tugged at his heart. He knew he didn't have to stop and talk to her. He could have just emptied the bin and moved on. But something compelled him to stay, to offer a few minutes of companionship to this lonely, elderly woman. It wasn't pity. It was empathy. It was a simple act of human connection. He never thought that someone else might see his action. It just felt right. Back to Sarah. Watching these interactions, Sarah felt a growing sense of warmth and gratitude towards this stranger. He was more than just a sanitation worker. He was a lifeline for her mother, a beacon of kindness in a world that often felt cold and indifferent. She had to meet him. She had to thank him. Before meeting Billy, Sarah felt she'd know about her mom. She began by digging into her mom's past. Opal's youth was a vibrant tapestry woven with threads of love, laughter, and loss. She had been a whirlwind of energy, a woman who embraced life with open arms. She had met her husband George at a dance, their eyes locking across a crowded room, a spark igniting that would burn brightly for over 50 years. They had built a life together, a modest but happy life filled with the joys and challenges of raising 3 children. Sarah remembered her childhood home as a place of warmth and laughter, her mother's voice always singing, her hands always busy, cooking, gardening, sewing. But life, as it often does, had thrown its share of curveballs. The loss of their eldest son in a car accident had cast a long shadow over their lives, a grief that Opal carried with her always. George's death, 10 years ago, had been another blow, leaving Opal adrift in a sea of loneliness. And then came the dementia, the slow, insidious erosion of her memories, her personality, her very self. It was as if a thief was stealing her away, bit by bit, leaving behind an empty shell. Sarah often found herself mourning the mother she had known, the vibrant, witty woman who had always been her rock. Now, let's delve into Billy's past. Billy's early life had been a stark contrast to Opal's. He had grown up in a broken home, marked by poverty and neglect. His father had been an alcoholic, his mother struggling to make ends meet. He had learned early on to fend for himself, to be resilient, to find solace in the small things. He had drifted from job to job, working as a construction worker, a dishwasher, a landscaper, anything to earn a living. He wasn't ashamed of his work as a sanitation worker. It was honest work, and it provided for him. But he often felt invisible, overlooked by the people he served. He was just the trash guy, a nameless, faceless figure in the background of their lives. He'd had his share of dreams, too. He'd once wanted to be a musician, his fingers itching to play the guitar, his voice yearning to sing. But life had a way of silencing those dreams, of pushing them to the back burner. Yet still held his dream secretly. The common thread between Opal and Billy, despite their vastly different backgrounds, was loss. They had both known the sting of grief, the ache of loneliness. Perhaps that's what drew them together, a silent understanding that transcended age, social status, and circumstance. That shared experience created a space for empathy, a bridge built of shared human vulnerability. Billy's route was a well-worn path, a routine etched into his days. He knew the streets, the houses, the rhythms of the neighborhood. He saw the best and worst of humanity in the trash he collected, the remnants of celebrations, the discarded remnants of lives. It wasn't glamorous work. It was physically demanding, often smelly, and sometimes thankless. He was often met with indifference, sometimes even with disdain. People would wrinkle their noses, avert their eyes, as if he were somehow less than human. But he didn't let it get to him. He took pride in his work, in keeping the streets clean, in providing a necessary service. He found a quiet dignity in the mundane. The highlight of his Tuesday route was his stop at Mrs. Zuka's house. It wasn't just about the trash. It was about the few minutes of connection, the brief respite from the anonymity of his job. Their conversations were simple, often repetitive. Opal would ask him the same questions, over and over again. "Are you George? Is it time for tea? Where are the children?" Billy never showed impatience. He would gently answer her questions, even if he had answered them a dozen times before. He would talk to her about the weather, about the flowers in her garden, about the birds singing in the trees. "You've got a beautiful smile, Mrs. Zuka," he would say, and Opal, for a fleeting moment, would remember how to smile. He saw the spark of the woman she once was, the glimmer of recognition in her eyes. And that was enough. That was more than enough. It was a reminder that even in the face of loss and decay, there was still beauty, still humanity, still connection. He did it not for reward. It's just what he felt. Sarah, armed with a growing understanding and a heart full of gratitude, continued to observe her mother and Billy through the digital eye of the camera. The recordings became a source of comfort, a testament to the unexpected kindness that bloomed in the most ordinary of settings. She noticed the small gestures, the unspoken language of compassion that flowed between them. Billy would bring Opal a single flower, plucked from a roadside patch of wildflowers, its vibrant color a stark contrast to the muted tones of Opal's world. Opal, in turn, would offer him a crookedly knitted scarf, the stitches uneven, the yarn a mismatched jumble of colors, a tangible representation of her fragmented mind, yet a gift given with genuine affection. One day, Billy arrived to find Opal struggling to weed her small garden. The flower beds, once her pride and joy, were now overgrown and neglected. Without a word, Billy set aside his usual tasks and began to help her. He pulled weeds, pruned overgrown bushes, and even planted a few new flowers, his strong hands surprisingly gentle with the delicate blooms. Sarah watched, mesmerized, as Opal, her face lit up with a rare spark of clarity, pointed to a specific rose bush, a blush pink variety that had been her husband's favorite. "George loved those," she said, her voice clear and strong, a memory surfacing from the depths of her fading mind. Billy, without missing a beat, carefully tended to the rose bush, pruning it with meticulous care. "They're beautiful, Mrs. Zuka," he said, "just like you." In those moments, Opal wasn't just a confused old woman. She was a woman who had loved and been loved, a woman who had found joy in the simple beauty of a rose. And Billy wasn't just a sanitation worker. He was a caretaker, a friend, a bridge to a past that was slipping away. He gave her more value. He was helping Sarah without knowing it. Sarah realized that Billy was providing her mother with something she couldn't: consistent, compassionate companionship. He was filling a void that Sarah, with her busy life and her own responsibilities, could only partially address. He was a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness could have a profound impact. The weight of her mother's isolation, coupled with the overwhelming gratitude she felt towards Billy, finally pushed Sarah to act. She couldn't just watch from afar anymore. She needed to meet this man, to thank him in person for the unexpected gift he was giving her mother. One Tuesday morning, Sarah drove to her mother's house, her heart pounding with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. She arrived just as Billy's truck was pulling up to the curb. She got out of her car and approached him, her hands slightly trembling. "Excuse me," she said, her voice a little shaky. "Are you Billy?" Billy, startled, turned around. He looked at her, his eyes questioning. "Yes," he said. "Can I help you?" "I'm Opal's daughter, Sarah," she said, extending her hand. I wanted to thank you." Billy's face softened. He shook her hand, his grip firm and warm. "There's no need to thank me," he said. "Your mother is a lovely woman." "But you go above and beyond," Sarah insisted. "I've seen the videos. You talk to her, you help her, you treat her with such kindness and respect. It means the world to me, to our family." Billy shifted his weight, a slight blush rising on his cheeks. I enjoy spending time with her," he said. "She reminds me of my grandmother." They talked for a long time that morning, standing on the sidewalk beside the rumbling sanitation truck. Sarah shared her concerns about her mother's declining health, her struggles with balancing work and caregiving. Billy listened patiently, offering words of comfort and understanding. He told her about his own life, about his dreams of being a musician, about the simple satisfaction he found in his work. He spoke with a quiet humility that touched Sarah deeply. Sarah realized that Billy wasn't just being kind to her mother. He was genuinely fond of her. He saw her not as a burden, but as a person, a human being deserving of respect and companionship. And in that realization, Sarah found a profound sense of peace. As Billy prepared to leave, Sarah felt a connection with this man. She gave her number to Billy, in case there's an emergency. They had become friends. News of Billy's kindness, amplified by Sarah's heartfelt expressions of gratitude, began to ripple through the quiet neighborhood. The story, initially shared through the watchful eye of a security camera, now spread through word of mouth, whispered conversations on front porches, and shared posts on the local community Facebook group. Most people were touched by the story. They saw it as a testament to the enduring power of human connection, a reminder that kindness could bloom in the most unexpected places. They praised Billy as a hero, a good Samaritan, a shining example of selfless compassion. But not everyone reacted with such positivity. There were whispers, subtle expressions of disapproval, a hint of prejudice that lingered in the air. Some people couldn't understand why a sanitation worker would spend so much time with an elderly woman who wasn't his relative. They questioned his motives, hinted at ulterior purposes, their words laced with a subtle disdain for his profession. "He's just looking for attention," one neighbor muttered to another. "It's probably for a tip when she dies," another speculated. Billy, of course, heard some of these whispers. He was used to being judged, to being underestimated. But it still stung. It was a reminder that even in acts of kindness, there could be shadows of prejudice. But Opal, in her moments of lucidity, became fiercely protective of Billy. She might not remember his name all the time, but she remembered his kindness. She remembered his smile, his gentle touch, his patience. One afternoon, when a particularly judgmental neighbor made a snide remark within Opal's earshot, the elderly woman, usually so frail and timid, straightened her back and fixed the neighbor with a steely gaze. "He's a good man," she declared, her voice surprisingly strong. "He's my friend, and you should be ashamed of yourself." That moment, captured not by a security camera, but by the memory of another neighbor who witnessed it, became another powerful testament to the bond between Opal and Billy. It was a reminder that even in the fading light of memory, the embers of love and loyalty could still burn brightly. It showed that love conquers prejudice. The inevitable shadow of time began to lengthen over Opal's life. Her health, already fragile, began to decline more rapidly. The moments of clarity became fewer and farther between, the fog of dementia thickening around her. Sarah, heartbroken but resolute, made the difficult decision to move her mother to a care facility where she could receive the round-the-clock attention she needed. Billy continued to visit Opal, even in the unfamiliar surroundings of the nursing home. He would bring her flowers, read to her from her favorite books, or simply sit beside her bed, holding her hand. He knew that she might not always recognize him, but he also knew that his presence brought her comfort, a sense of familiarity in a world that was increasingly strange and confusing. Sarah was always there, too, juggling her work and her visits, her heart aching with the knowledge that her time with her mother was growing short. She and Billy often found themselves together at Opal's bedside, sharing stories, offering each other support, their unlikely friendship forged in the crucible of shared care and concern. One afternoon, as the sun streamed through the window, casting a warm glow on Opal's face, she opened her eyes and looked at Billy. A flicker of recognition sparked in her gaze. "George?" she whispered, her voice weak but clear. Billy, without hesitation, smiled and took her hand. "Yes, Opal," he said gently. "It's me." Opal squeezed his hand, a faint smile gracing her lips. She looked at Sarah, too, a glimmer of love in her eyes. And then, peacefully, she closed her eyes for the last time. It wasn't a dramatic death, not a scene filled with weeping and wailing. It was a quiet passing, gentle release from a life that had been lived fully, a life that had touched others in unexpected ways. Opal's passing left a void, a quiet space in the lives she had touched. But it wasn't a void of emptiness. It was a space filled with memories, with gratitude, with the lingering warmth of a life well lived, even in its final, fading moments. Billy continued his route, his truck rumbling through the familiar streets. The house on Elm Street stood empty now, the garden slowly returning to its wild state, but the memory of Opal lingered, a gentle presence in the air. He often found himself looking at the house, remembering the conversations, the smiles, the shared moments of connection. He continued to visit the nursing home, not to see Opal, but to visit other residents, to offer a few minutes of companionship, a kind word, a listening ear. He had realized, through his friendship with Opal, that even the smallest acts of kindness could make a difference, could brighten a lonely day, could bring a flicker of light to eyes dimmed by age and illness. He thought that it's the right way to honor Opal. He even started taking guitar lessons, tentatively exploring the musical dreams he had put aside for so long. It was a small step, a way of reclaiming a part of himself that he had almost forgotten. Opal, he felt, would have approved. He sometimes think that he could hear Opal said, "You looking good like that hair, you got it down." Sarah, grieving but also grateful, found solace in the memories of her mother and in the unexpected friendship she had formed with Billy. She had learned, through Opal and Billy's connection, the profound importance of human connection, the power of empathy, the beauty of simple acts of kindness. She started volunteering at the local senior center, spending time with elderly residents, listening to their stories, sharing laughter and companionship. She realized that her mother's legacy wasn't just about the past. It was about the present, about the ways in which she could continue to make a difference in the lives of others. The story of Opal and Billy, the elderly woman with dementia and the kind sanitation worker, continued to ripple through the community. It became a local legend, a reminder that heroes could be found in the most unexpected places, that the most profound connections could be forged in the most ordinary of circumstances. The local newspaper even ran a story about Billy, highlighting his selfless compassion and the impact he had had on Opal's life. It was a small, feel-good story tucked away on a back page, but it resonated with readers. It was a reminder that in a world often filled with negativity and division, there was still room for kindness, for empathy, for genuine human connection. Billy was a little embarrassed by the attention, but he also felt a sense of quiet pride. He hadn't done it for the recognition. He had done it because it was the right thing to do. But the story, he realized, had a power beyond his own actions. It was a reminder that everyone, regardless of their age, their social status, their profession, deserved to be treated with dignity and respect. The ending is an open invitation, a call for every reader to be a little bit more like Billy. And so, the story of Opal and Billy ends, not with a dramatic climax, but with a quiet ripple of hope. It's a story about the unexpected beauty of human connection, about the power of kindness to transcend boundaries, about the enduring legacy of a life lived with love and compassion, even in its final, fading moments. It's a story that reminds us that even the smallest acts of kindness can make a world of difference, that heroes can be found in the most unlikely places, and that the bonds of friendship can blossom in the most unexpected ways. It is a story worth sharing, a story that deserves to go viral, not for its sensationalism, but for its simple, profound truth. The truth that a single act of kindness can change the world.